if we look at the government, it's no more than a service corporation with enforcement capability. And so, what other corporation has enforcement ability? No, none.
You can't give me the right to be a human being. I'm born with that right. Now you can keep me from having that if you've got all the policemen and all the jobs on your side.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Spokanearchy. This is our 6th episode, and we do have the full crew here tonight. We have Gerard and Simon with me. Hello, gentlemen. Thanks for joining me. All right, so let's just jump right into it, I guess. So today's episode is going to be centered around in Spokane. One of the most recent issues for the city of Spokane, at least, is the city council has voted to enact some watering restrictions for the summer months specifically, where they don't want residents to water within certain hours, between I don't remember them exactly, but we'll just say 10 to 4 o'clock during the hottest hours of the day, which, honestly, I'm not going to get into whether or not there's enough water, but if you're just being smart about it, why would you water your lawn at the hottest part of the day when the water's just going to evaporate off the blades of grass? That seems like common sense. We don't really need government to tell us to do that, or not do that, I should say. But that's, this is the whole concept that government is here to, rule our lives for us and tell us what to do. That was the first part of the restrictions, was that when you can water, and certain residents, like odd addresses, can water on certain days, and even addresses can water on other days. To, I guess, reduce the amount of water being used. So they met a few weeks ago. It was the middle of May. Simon and I went down to try to get some interviews. We did get one interview with someone that was willing to speak, so we'll show that here in a little bit. But the main thing is my concern, I don't know about you guys, but my concern is that the city has no enforcement mechanism. And so they're literally, the only way to enforce these new restrictions they're proposing on watering is to have neighbors call and tattletale on each other. Oh, my neighbor Joe is over here watering and it's a Tuesday and he's not supposed to be. So that's my biggest problem. Since we've really had this concept of telling on our neighbors since 9/11, if you see something suspicious, you're supposed to report it to government, but especially in the state of Washington, since the restrictions from the mandates, I should say, from the COVIDs started back in March of 2019. Is that right? 2019?
Yeah.
2020. Well, they literally asked, the king, Inslee, had a specific email address and website you could go to turn in people in your community that were daring to keep their businesses open and try to be able to feed their families and things like that without government assistance. So this idea that we're supposed to be turning in our neighbors for not complying with rules has really been just amplified in the last 2 years, in my opinion, and this is just more of that, because it's the only enforcement mechanism. So I'm going to be quiet now and let you guys comment on that a little bit.
Well, yeah, it's crazy, right? I guess the water company can, see, when you're using water or whatever around certain times. But, yeah, it was mainly having a snitch line for tattletales. And the fact that they're just doing it supposedly in the city of Spokane, which is the most expensive place to have water. It's outrageously expensive, dude, in the city. So it's it might be doing a lot of people favors, dude. You can look on a good side of get rid of your lawn.
Right?
Yeah.
I would prefer to go a step back and say, why does the city have a monopoly on water? And
Well, yeah. I mean,
whenever they do these things, we end up saying we get caught up into the minutia of it, and we don't ask the question. Wait a minute. Why am I forced to get my water from the city? They won't even let me drill a well. So
right.
now that they have a monopoly on the water, well, naturally what follows is control over everybody. Because what's the one thing we need if in order to not die in 3 days? Water.
Right.
Right.
So that's my biggest problem. The part about enforcement and everything, that's to me that's minutia.
Right. No,
Right.
no, you're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I guess just to jump on a solution real quick, that was my first response when I heard about this is, okay, if you're going to tell me how much water I can use, and you brought up a good point with the meters, Simon, they can monitor, as pretty much everybody has smart water meters now. I'm sure those have been installed, so they know how much water you're using. They can shut it off with a push of a button if they want to. So I guess my solution, just to jump it out there real quick, was, okay, I'm going to call somebody who has a drilling rig and come put a well in my backyard. And then I don't have to worry about it. I'll just use as much water as I want. I'll sell it to my neighbors who apparently can't use any. And maybe the neighbors who don't want poisoned, fluoride-infested water can sell them from my well as well.
I'm rich, Mike.
Even though technically, I don't know, we can't really confirm this. Allegedly, they're not putting fluoride in our water yet in Spokane. They're just doing studies. But that's another issue we can talk about another day if we want to. But yeah, why, like Gerard said, why should they have a monopoly? Why shouldn't I be able to just, hey, you got a drilling rig? Get it in my backyard. Let's get me a well.
Right. Yeah. Totally. This is the problem, right? That we're all facing all the time, constantly, and this is why we're probably doing this show. Like, just trying to get people to think, I guess.
Right. And I could even, so if I put a well in my backyard, who's to say that I couldn't then start maybe installing a line to my neighbors? And then that would help me cover the expense of that, right? Like, my neighbor's like, hey, dude, that was pretty smart. You put that well in your backyard. How about you send a little over my way and I throw you a few bucks for that?
Right, yeah, totally. Yeah.
There's other questions that should be asked as well, like, is there an actual water shortage? This doesn't even start until next year. Well, how do they know what's going to happen next year?
Right?
Has nothing to do with the shortage. Nothing.
Right.
No, that's a really good point. It's really, this whole thing is brought on, I can't remember the name of the group, but it's some like Spokane River Savers or something like that. That they're concerned that, the Spokane River is getting too low. Well, the reason it may run low at certain parts of the year is there's dams from Lake Coeur d'Alene all the way along, even right in downtown Spokane, that they regulate the amount of water that goes through so that we can have fun and play in our lakes and reservoirs that are all full.
Right.
So there's that, and then what's going to happen to the water that doesn't get used? Where does that go? Does it just flow into the Columbia and everybody's
right?
happy?
Bye-bye, see ya.
It just makes no sense. There is absolutely zero sense in it whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah, I guess that is probably the most important thing, is if I was a resident of the city of Spokane, I would go down there and start demanding, like, wait a minute, can you just show me that we're running out of water, first of all, by at least next year? I don't know exactly the aquifer here, but when I went to the University of Texas in San Antonio, I started in geology, and we used to do studies on the water table. We'd put these huge lead wire spools on our back, and we'd create an electromagnetic field that would go down in the ground. And based on how fast it was traveling and sending signals back up to us, we could determine what was down there, how far down it was. And so we were looking at the aquifer. We would go to these big ranches in West Texas and do these studies to find out how much groundwater they had. And there, we were close enough. There wasn't a big mountain range like the Cascades between us and the ocean, but we were close enough to the ocean that, I'm sorry, there was never a concern of the aquifer running dry. The concern was if salt water is heavier, fresh water is not as dense, so it's on top of the salt water. So if you start sucking all the fresh water out, the ocean is going to fill the aquifer with salt water. And so the aquifer is never going to run out. It's just, are we using salt water or fresh water? That was the issue there.
Yeah.
So, eventually, possibly, okay, you might have to put some desalinization plants in to take the salt out of the water, things like that, but you're not running out of water.
Right.
Especially if you're going to believe this whole climate change stuff, where they're saying, in Spokane, we're going to be beachfront property, in 2050 or whatever, when the ice caps have melted and all this stuff. Like, why are we worrying about running out of water if all that is really happening?
Yeah, well, just let the ice caps provide us water, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we should be melting them if we're running out of water. You know what I mean? Put some heaters up.
This whole idea that we're running out of everything is absolutely absurd.
It's the whole scarcity myth that's been going on forever. You hear everybody talk about it, that studied history and resources were always scarce. So, and we haven't run out of anything. Like the gas thing in the 70s. Now we're back to it a little bit, I guess. Like we're going to run out of oil or gas or something. So let's charge everybody more for it instead of finding an alternative that you can't make money on. No, we can't do that. We're just going to charge you more and not allow you to use anything else. And then if you do use something else, either we kill you or we throw you in jail, whatever it is.
Right.
Like we know there's tons of alternatives out there and better ways to do everything. And government just overspends and like it's like a crazy child on a sugar high, dude, all the time.
Right. Well, I'll just throw this out there. Like when I moved into the house I'm in now, I had a pretty nice yard, and as I started to wake up, I was just like, why am I watering grass? It is completely useless to me and my family.
Right.
It looks good, whatever. But it's completely
Yeah.
useless. I can't eat it. I mean, I guess you can, like wheatgrass. There's like when they talk about that, I actually watched this video on foraging. Like the very bottom part of the grass, we can actually digest and have some nutrients for us, but it's not very
Right.
good.
Yeah.
So
No.
how about instead of saying like let's just play their game that there is possibly a shortage, why are we telling people to stop watering their grass? Instead of saying, get rid of your grass, it's useless, put in some rocks, or who cares what your front yard looks like? Or how about put some tomato, if you're going to water something, how about water something that's going to be
Food.
Yeah.
Another thing we're running out of somehow.
Right? Yeah, we got shortages of food, but we need to worry about watering our grass in our front yards.
Right.
Oh, all right. Well, I was going to play the one interview that Simon and I got. Do you have any more, anything else to contribute before I play that, Gerard?
Did we talk about the mayor and her veto and
Well, no, because that's chronologically a little bit down. So the interview I was going to play here was the night that the city council did their initial vote. So we'll play that first, and then we'll get into the mayor and her veto. Yes, I know you're very antsy about Mayor Squidward there. Okay, so let me play this video.
Hey everybody, so I'm here in Spokane tonight. There's a city council meeting, and they're they're discussing many topics, but one of the hot issues right now is they're talking about water restrictions for watering your lawns. Certain days you may be able to water them, not being able to water your sidewalks to clean them off, things like that. So I'm just interviewing, asking a few questions to people that are making comments. So I have Natalie, you guys have seen her on the channel before. So I just kind of want to get your brief thoughts, I guess, and what your initial thoughts are on the city having restrictions.
I'm just learning about it, but I'm learning that the city will be able to maintain their sprinkler systems, but a home residence will not. I don't really see that as equitable. And if we're so worried about conservation, you would want to stop all sprinklers, right, across an entire city if that's what we're doing. And then to have fines, you're going to have neighbors calling in on neighbors, so we're going to pit neighbor against neighbor. I just don't see that as a good community effort.
Right, that's kind of the angle I want to take on this. Since March of 2020, when COVID started, we've heard the governor asking neighbors to turn in neighbors for leaving their houses, not wearing masks.
School districts have the Tattletale hotline where you can call anonymously to turn people in. Yes.
So it's really been ramped up, and now, like every day on the radio, I hear commercials say, you know, see something, say something. They even say, what do you see, say? So now this is just another aspect of us. As neighbors being asked to turn some neighbors for something wrong.
Yeah, and define wrong, right? Because I use water that I pay for, that we have an abundance of. I'm all for conserving. I think it's a good idea to maybe think about it. And we always have. Like, I've lived in this district my entire life. And in the summer, sometimes when the river's low, they'll ask us to stop watering our lawn, and I do.
Right.
Absolutely.
Seems pretty reasonable. You know, another thing that I just recently looked into is primary water sources. Have you ever heard anything about that?
Primary meaning river?
Primary meaning it's from like deeper in the earth. It's been cycled even deeper than the aquifers, basically. It's been cycled for a long time. So there's inherently big pockets of this that we haven't tapped into. Like nobody. It's just interesting to me that the conversation never goes to things like that. It's always about we have to restrict, now we have to have another enforcement mechanism. So.
Well, and why does conservation have to do with, again, pitting a neighbor against a neighbor? Like, I don't understand that.
I guess, yeah, to me, if they presented it a different way, like, hey, let's have a workshop or a community event where we can bring people in and say, hey, if we have these issues, how are we going to work together? And instead of tattling on your neighbor, maybe having a conversation with your neighbor.
Right.
Keep people out of like approach people in a civil manner, maybe.
Well, how about talk about conservation efforts? Like, what could people do? Maybe we could have a community event to where we offer the plastic barrels to catch rainwater to water the garden. Let's talk about things that might help conserving. And here's a great one: turn off your sprinkler system when it's raining. And how about the city and the schools do the same thing, because they're always going on rain.
Yeah, like we have a program to give people to do. I know there's water sensors you can put in your ground after it rains and shut them off. So how about maybe even like I would be willing to put money towards a program for people that couldn't afford those sensors to have put in things like that. So that might be something to talk about. So, well, thank you for sharing your ideas.
And I have to always plug myself at this point because I'm running for Washington State Representative, District 3 against Tim Ormsby, and I think I'm a really good option.
So I'm totally unaware of all the voting stuff.
The primary is August 2nd, which is very important. Please vote in the primary. A lot of people don't. And then the general election is November 8th.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
One of the probably biggest things I took away from what she said is she talked about if the city really wants to conserve water, why is it only talking about how you can not use the water that you're actually already paid for the system to be there, the pumps, the wells, all that. They don't offer any, like the barrels you can put under your roof to collect rainwater. I mean, we've seen stories that municipalities are like fining people for doing that stuff because it's dangerous. That's like, oh, we haven't filtered or tested that water. That was one of the things I got from that. Of course, she also mentioned, like we did, tattling on neighbors. It's not a very, I don't know, who wants to live in a community where you're encouraged to tattle on your neighbors? She brought up that, the schools had a hotline, for like other parents and, people to call. I don't know. She pretty much just echoed a lot of our sentiments we already talked about, so I guess we don't need to stick with that a whole lot. But this night, after she gave us this interview, as we mentioned, the city council did approve these water restrictions. And the mayor of Spokane did veto that. And she said she kind of cited the same things. She said it was symbolic, her veto, because she knew that they would have the votes to override her veto. So she said it was mainly symbolic. So she's kind of just being a politician and trying to appeal to, she knows it's going through anyways, so she's trying to appeal to a certain sect of voters.
Right. It's for votes.
Right,
Hey.
yeah.
Basically.
But the one thing like I brought up to her was primary water. I know, Simon, you've mentioned this in the past.
Right.
What's his nose in Libya, that was allegedly one of the things he was starting to look into is getting primary water.
He already had it. Gaddafi already had it.
Okay.
Gaddafi already had primary water, and I'm pretty sure all of his citizens did not pay for water.
So I don't really know much about primary water. You shared it with me. Do you know much about that? Like, is another source? Or do you
Yeah. So what they're talking about how primary water works is oxygen and hydrogen molecule marry and create water. So it's always being created under rivers, under the earth, or wherever it's at. That's pretty much how we get natural springs going, like percolating up. There's been scenarios in Napa, California, where the creek was dry and we've had an earthquake and you get primary water percolating up. So it's like a pressure thing that needs to be released in a certain way, a certain type of way they drill. Like I mean, I know about it, but I haven't really like studied it to like give a formal thing, but it's pretty much, it's hydrogen, oxygen, which creates
We used
water.
to make water in our chemistry lab with electrolysis.
There
All
you
you
go.
have to do is just apply electricity
There
to
you go.
hydrogen and oxygen, and then boom, you've got water.
There you go.
Okay, so as always, I'm going to throw some links in the description of this video. When Simon and I did go down to do this interview, I printed out a flyer about primary water. It's kind of some simple information, so I'll throw a link to that in the description. And kind of like what you just brought up, Gerard, I've actually seen, just in the last couple of days doing some research on this, people that have these little devices where, if you're in like a natural disaster and your power goes down and you don't have a source of water, these people put these little boxes out. I didn't get too into it to know exactly how it works, but they're literally able to, more or less, it looked like they were collecting condensation inside of these. But I mean, this one guy took
Right.
a 5-gallon bucket of water in a day doing that. So I don't know, he might have had something hooked up to it to create more. Maybe had a little heat source in there or something to create condensation more. But I mean, there's plenty of ways to get water, at least to be able to drink, and that's really what we need it for. So
Right, yeah.
And yeah, I don't know, as far as the primary water, it's kind of new to me, but there's got to be more sources of water than what we are kind of sold by our municipalities and our government entities. I know, like in geology, we talked about the earth, not the atmosphere, but in talking about the earth and water and all these things, we're just focused on this, like you said, the cycle of water above Earth, how it's going to evaporate from the oceans, and then it goes and rains, and then it rains, and it comes down, and it fills our aquifers. Like, that's all we're focused on, when there's clearly other sources to get water from just this cycle of the atmosphere.
Right.
It really seems pretty ridiculous that that's all we're focused on. That's, I mean, not us, but like, that's all government. Obviously, that's what they can control. I guess that's what it boils down to, right?
Information, right? Yeah.
Information, but they can also control that. They can. I mean, we know they can control the weather and all these other things. So.
Oh yeah, right.
They can control what happens in the atmosphere. Then this is the only way our water comes in.
Right. Yeah.
They can manipulate it. At the very least, manipulate it. Maybe not completely control it. I don't know enough about to make that claim, but they can manipulate it.
No, they completely control it. They completely control it.
But even outside of those solutions, I mean, we're nowhere near that. I mean, people use 200 gallons of water a day just to wash their arms. So
Right.
we're not anywhere near this dire of a situation. But in the situation that we are in, we have, if we look at the government, it's no more than a service corporation with enforcement capability. And so, what other corporation has enforcement ability? No, none. And so, if we just look at it from, wait a minute, the conversation should be, hey, we want 2 or 3 other water providers so we can choose who we want our water provider to be.
Right.
And if we did that, then a lot of these things would work themselves out. People who use less water would pay less. Imagine that.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Whitworth, I mean, they have an aquifer coming from Ponderay, and it's like $21, $22 a month. You're on Whitworth, aren't you, Gerard?
Sure. Yeah, we are.
I'm not going to disclose that.
In an undisclosed location.
Yeah, but they have a huge amount of water to draw from. It's
Right.
never ending.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So just I mean, just on that right there, based on what I know from my geology classes and the studies we did, I'm sorry, Whitworth is not far enough away from Spokane that those 2 water sources don't mix. So
or that they couldn't.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So if there's plenty for the Whitworth water system users, whatever that's called, there's no reason that there should be restrictions because the city of Spokane is using something. They're not 2 separate officers, I guarantee you.
It's gang territory, man. Come on. Can't come in my territory.
Well, like you said,
Can't be selling water over here.
like corporate enforcement. That would be like if I, went into Walmart or whatever, or any corporation to buy some like gallons of water, and they decided like, oh, this guy's buying 3 instead of 2. Let's tackle him on the way out. We would stop going to Walmart to buy water.
No,
This
you just
idea-
instead of 3.
This idea that we need to have enforcement, punishment for people who use too much water, it's dangerous. It's dangerous to our interactions among each other as human beings. I mean, if you watch the interview, the reporter asked one question that I saw, which was, well, what good is it if we can't enforce it? That was her only concern.
Right.
Well, we need to knock some heads if people drink too much water.
Right.
That was her only concern. And that's what makes me nervous about this ever tightening noose that we have on people and their choices.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, to me, that's how all these things start is, oh, well, don't worry, we're not going to enforce anything. It's just like, we're just trying to get people to be neighborly and to just conserve water. So, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and pass this, and I'll support that. And then, like, 2 years down the road, then all of a sudden, well, just like you said, the reporter brought it up, and now other people, well, my neighbor over there, they're not conserving, and how are we going to stop them? Like, I'm doing it out of goodwill. I have decided to not water on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but my neighbor still does it every day of the week, and we got to stop that guy. And that's literally what we're doing. Is it's the start of, like you said, tightening that noose, getting us to instead of saying, hey, government, why are you guys trying to threaten us with force because I want to water my yard? Instead of like pitting instead of the community saying, government, no, we're not doing this, we're instead pitted against each other. Like, well, that's not fair. I'm being a good citizen, and I'm not watering on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but Frank is, and his lawn looks great, and he's going to be able to sell his house for more than me.
It's all virtual signaling, dude. You know what I mean? Right. It's the same thing, and then it's just like, it's like I'm paying for it. I get to use it. Like I'm paying for every drop. Basically, I'm using. So it's not like I'm getting anything for free. I'm paying for it. Period. Right. So therefore, if it's just some kind of supply that you're giving me that I'm paying for, depending on how much you jack up the price on it, I'm going to use the crap out of it. I'm going to use it all the time.
That's a really good point. Like here in Liberty Lake, we have the Liberty Lake Sewer and Water District. We get our water from. And that's exactly.
You mean water from the sewer, dude?
Yeah. It's great stuff, man. Doesn't have any fluoride in it.
It's got a bunch of Prozac and everything else, though.
But Post Falls, right across the imaginary line, they put fluoride in theirs, but it doesn't merge into mine at all. Don't worry. No, but what they do is, like, for a certain amount, up to so many gallons per month or week or whatever, they charge you this rate. And then, like, if you use more than that, if you use between these amounts, you're getting charged an extra rate. And, like, there's, like, tiers.
Right.
And someone like me that isn't concerned about my grass being perfectly green and all that, I've never had to pay anything above the base amount in this house that I live in. Now, before I cared about that stuff and I was married and I lived, in a different house, then I did because I was, I got to have the greenest grass in the neighborhood. And so, but I did pay that.
Throwing the poison fertilizer on it.
But I mean, that was my choice. I wasn't forced just because I wanted to water on a Tuesday. No, it was my choice to say, I want my grass to be greener.
Right.
I'm going to water it more. And I paid more for it. Now I don't.
Right.
I don't want my grass. So, I mean, that seems, rather than, like Gerard said, our government constantly using these enforcement mechanisms on us to control us, how about just give us choice? And rather than using force on us, just say, if you want to use a ton of water, it's going to cost you more. Not just because you're using more, but we're actually going to charge you a higher rate. And how Liberty Lake does it, I got to say, I don't like it. I'm forced to use it. Like you said, it's a monopolization of water. But if I go over that first tier, it's not like they charge me for everything I used at the higher rate. They literally only, so beyond this amount, for that, wherever you use above that, now you're getting charged that rate. But the first amount is still at the lower rate.
Right, yeah. Yep.
I mean, if I was a corporation selling water to people, that's how I would do it. I wouldn't start sending out goons with guns and saying, dude, you used 100 gallons of water this month. Now you get a bullet in your leg or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we wouldn't be a corporation hoarding life-giving essences.
Right, we're not evil. I keep forgetting that.
I know. It's okay, dude. I'll just remind you every once in a while.
Well, everybody has a human right, a fundamental right to procure what they need to survive.
Well, again, like I think me and Corey went over this last week or the week before. I don't even use rights anymore. It's self-evident. Like, what's a right? Like, what? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's self-evident.
Right, like here in Liberty Lake, there's deer in a lake like a few blocks from me. So I guess Liberty Lake is, let's use Spokane since that was what we're talking about. There's a river going through Spokane. I'm sure there's some deer around there. Like, if the deer, do they have an allotment of water they can use? Can they only go down to the river and drink on Tuesdays and Thursdays? Right? If you're a deer,
that's why we're opening hunting season early.
If you're a deer or some wildlife on the north side of the river, you get to go drink on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you're on the south side of the river and you're an animal, you only get to go on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and no one gets
Right.
Sundays because that's, it's Sunday.
Yeah.
If you have a 1 on your left antler and a 2 on your right antler.
Right? So yeah,
Yeah.
the whole self-effort.
Wow.
Just go back to nature,
Yeah.
when the deer runs out of, if the deer drinks too much water or uses too much water, then it has to go find another source of water, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe next year he's like, dude, remember we really drank a lot of water and then we had to walk a long ways to find more. Let's not do that again.
Oh, see, but you're being the police.
But I'm just, no, that's the deer saying. I'm just saying, but that would never happen. Like, what deer is going to drink that much water?
I'm just messing with you.
All right. Well,
So have you noticed that things have flipped, where it used to be that the people, I guess, were supposed to like tell the government what to do and have some kind of a say on things, but that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. That the people go down to the city council and they say, no, this is stupid, we don't need this, and they do it anyway.
Right.
And then, I don't know if you know this, but the word mayor is Latin for better. It means better. So that she is better than us, and she can decide for us what needs to happen. And it's the opposite. It's minor is the opposite of mayor.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And so, yeah. So we have to point these things out.
Right.
These people are betters. They're supposed to be serving us. And instead, they do whatever they want to do. And then they ease into it. And then after a while, they crack your head open if you disobey.
Right.
So we have to be calling this out constantly.
No, that's a really good point, too, with the name of the mayor, better. Like, I never even thought of it that way, but that's 100% correct. No, she's not better than me. Oh, that's insane. No,
I think Obama said it the best, right? Obama said it the best. He said something that we're not smart enough to make our own decisions. That's why we're politicians are here, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. He came right out and said it.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, man.
Like, straight face and everything. Everybody's like, I love you.
But notice he made that speech while he was in Europe, as if we weren't going to hear it eventually.
Right. Oh, man. Can't make this stuff up. All right, well, let me play the interview with Mayor Nadine Squidward so that we can hear that, since we've made a few comments about it. And here, just obviously it's more of how politicians work. It's more for that kind of speak, but it'd be good for everybody to hear, I think.
The Spokane City Council's plans to conserve water during the hot summer months hit a roadblock today. Mayor Nadine Woodward vetoed the ordinance that was just passed by City Council.
So the question is, what happens now? KREM 2's Amanda Rowley talked with Mayor Woodward today. She's joining us now live with more on that decision. Amanda?
The Water Conservation Ordinance was first introduced to Spokane City Council 2 weeks ago. Now, City Council and the mayor both agree we all need to conserve our water here in Spokane. But the sticking point has been how to enforce this. The first version of the ordinance included penalties, such as a $20 surcharge to a violator's water bill if they water their lawn outside of the approved hours. Councilmember Michael Cathcart later proposed a version with incentives to use less water. But at Council's most recent meeting, it approved a version of the ordinance that does not include fines or incentives. It now primarily hinges on voluntary compliance. But the mayor still vetoed this ordinance today, which means City Council now has 30 days to consider overriding that veto. It needs 5 votes to do this, which Council President Brian Beggs is confident will pass, and he expects that to happen next Monday. This is only Mayor Woodward's second veto since she's taken office. She told me, in this case, her veto is symbolic because Council does have the votes to override it.
It's not something that I do regularly. It's not something that I do lightly, but I don't want to create a culture of neighbors telling on neighbors.
Now, we want to clarify what the mayor is talking about there with neighbors reporting each other. As the current ordinance reads, there are no fees or other penalties for those who violate the restrictions.
If there's no enforcement component to the ordinance, what's to say anyone will follow these restrictions?
Well, we are putting our trust in your typical Spokane person that they want to follow the law, just like people don't go, for the most part, speeding through neighborhoods.
Now, if City Council overrides the mayor's veto, the ordinance will go into effect in June next year. Now, Council President Brian Beggs told me after the ordinance has been in effect for 18 months, a likely change would be increasing water rates for those who use more water than average. Amanda Rowley, KREM 2 News.
One of the things I just want to say real quick, Gerard, that you pointed out, one of the first things they said in there was that everybody in the city council and the mayor agree that we need to conserve water. That was like the first thing they said in that. So we're still fighting about how to do that, but we need to conserve water. But they presented no evidence of why we need to conserve water.
None whatsoever.
But they all agree that we need to conserve water. And then, as they talked about the first draft of this, it had a $20 surcharge if you use too much water. And Michael Cathcart, one of the city council members, decided that wasn't a good idea, that instead we should give incentives to use less water. Which, okay, whatever. But of course, as inept as city council and all government is, their final solution was to kill off all the humans. Now, their final solution was to not have any incentives or punishments. So literally, they're just putting some words on paper. And as Councilman Brian Beggs illuminated there, that we're just relying on the goodness of the Spokane people. And he had like a little smirk on his face when he said that, knowing that like they're going to create regulations that people are going to be like, this is ridiculous, I'm not following this. And he tried to use the example of, we're going to rely on the people of Spokane to follow the laws, just like they do for the most part by not speeding through neighborhoods. And I just got to say this real quick on the whole speeding thing. You guys know it. Most people who follow the channel know it. I don't have a driver's license because I don't drive. But when I first started that, my best way to defend myself was to not break any of their little rules of the road, so they couldn't pull me over with that threat of violence. I was literally passed by everyone when I followed the posted speed limit. Like grandma was passing me. So this concept that like, people just thought, they don't speed. Oh man, everybody breaks the law. I was literally passed by everyone.
It's because they set it artificially low so that they can collect money from people, and that's exactly what they're going to do with the water.
Right?
Right.
Yeah, because that's what people do is they drive a speed that is reasonable. Like, no one has a death wish. I've never met anyone that gets in their car and is like, you know what? I don't feel safe driving 120 miles an hour, but that's what I'm doing.
Maybe you're 16. I don't know. But...
Well, but when you're 16, so just to go on that real quick, this is a little side tangent. When I was a teenager in Montana, was when they got rid of speed limits in Montana. So I could drive this. There was literally the limit was whatever was reasonable and prudent. So I actually got pulled over with some of my friends driving out to Manhattan, Montana. I was driving at the time. I didn't have a license. I guess I wasn't driving, but I didn't have a license. But anyways, the guy pulled me over. Didn't even consider giving me a ticket because he knew there was no way to enforce it. But he literally just was like, anytime you're going over 90, you're probably going to get pulled over just because other people may not be expecting you to go that fast. So you just, keep that in mind. He even told me, like, you're a teenager, you're a young kid, your reflexes are good. You can drive that fast and you feel comfortable, but when you fly by someone going 60 miles an hour on the freeway and you're going 90, it might grandma going 60 might be like, ah, and have a heart attack. But even then, like I was comfortable driving as fast as I was. I had no problem with it. You know,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So yeah, this concept that like, well, that's what keeps us safe on the roads is the speed limits, because otherwise people would be just driving crazy.
Right. If we didn't have all these rules or laws, codes, and statutes, everybody would just go crazy, I guess. That's what I hear all the time. It'd be a free for all.
That's self-evident, right? Like that's what we see in nature. Like I was driving and I saw in a field several different animals, and they were all just going crazy, beating each other up, and they weren't just like eating grass over here and flying around over here. And
it was mayhem.
Yeah.
Well, do you guys have any comments? You guys both watched that beforehand. Do you have any comments on the mayor there? I know you do. You've been itching, Gerard. Let's hear it.
I think I already said them. I was a little bit too early.
Right. Okay.
But I do have one thing to say about if we look at California, they're letting billions of gallons of good water flow into the Pacific Ocean just because they want to keep control of everybody and pretend like there's a drought.
Oh yeah.
So that's what's going to happen if we let government control the water. It will happen eventually.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. Okay. So we talked about some solutions, or I did at the beginning by just having a drilling rig come up and drill a new well. But let's, so along those lines of maybe everybody doesn't have the resources to do that, but how do we not allow government to monopolize water, which is the reason we have life on this planet, if we're being honest? Like,
well, one good way is to move out of the city.
Right.
Don't live in a city, because that's where this all starts.
Yeah.
But, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the control. Yeah. I mean, like you said, in the city, you have one option. You either don't have water or you go buy it somewhere, and I don't know. But it's completely controlled in the city. That's part of the reasons, like, we probably built cities is perfect control.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of evidence for that.
Yeah.
But if you are in the city, yeah, you don't really have much choice. They're not gonna have separate companies to provide water. People they like their convenience. They just want it to come through the pipes, and they want to turn on the spigot. Right. So that's why they're willing to do that. People that live in the city aren't usually too concerned about whether or not they're being controlled, or and if they have to tell on their neighbor, they're not too worried about that. So I don't have too many solution ideas for people that live in the city.
Other than get out.
Yeah.
Okay, so one thing I want to bring up real quick, I have never heard of this, but one of the new blogs that I'm on is Flirt, and I started following this person on there. I'm going to butcher her name, Machan. She's in Iran. And she created this blog post a couple of days ago about the Shushtar Historical Hydraulic System, a masterpiece of genius and creativity and the manifestation of ancient architecture. Have you guys ever heard of this in Iran? It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
No.
Nope.
So I'm going to try to read a little bit about here. It has been named as the largest industrial complex in the world before the Industrial Revolution. And this work is one of the technical engineering masterpieces in the world according to the time of construction and the period in which it was built. And I'm going to try to get here. So basically it's like a water system. So it says, in the construction. Talks about what they use as different types of clays, blah, 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 but it talks about, so the water system, these structures once prospered industry and agriculture and played an important role in transportation, communications, and commerce. The Shustar historical hydraulic system delivered water evenly throughout the city and prevented the eruption of the Quran River. So it prevented like flooding of the river and went through the city. But they also used it to create cool air that sends water to people's homes through Shavadans, which basically, so they created cellars and basements, and they would run the water underneath there and use the cool air coming off the water to cool their buildings. So, I mean, I'm going to put a link to this in the description of this video, but I just made a comment to her how, why is it in these alleged like ancient civilizations, we seem to have been able to create more efficient without actually using power. I mean, there was no electricity to run this stuff, but it was a fairly efficient way to both travel. They could use the water to travel, they use it to drink, and they use it for agriculture. And I guarantee you it was better for the environment. I guarantee you they weren't putting fluoride in it and then flooding their fields with drinking it, you know what I mean? So, I mean, it's just another example of like control, like Gerard said. Okay, they're letting all this fresh water go into the ocean so that they can keep an alleged drought going, and control how people use water and all these things in California, when we have systems before the Industrial Revolution that allegedly worked and delivered water to people and gave people fresh water. Why can't we copy these types of systems and redo systems like that? Obviously, we know the answer.
Right. You know why. Don't be sorry. Yeah, I mean, honestly, there is no solution to this. I mean, the government control is just going to keep going and going and going, because the majority of people love their slavery. It's just, it is what it is. Like, and none of us live in Spokane, the city of Spokane, so it doesn't affect me.
Right? None of us live in the city of Spokane, and we're all moving out of the city too.
Yeah.
As Gerard said. So I shared that blog with you guys. I don't know if you can see it, but I just pulled it up on the screen here so other people can see the pictures you shared at least. I mean, she didn't like go into too much depth, but just kind of shared something that I'd never heard of. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So, solutions, like myself, moving out of the city, that's a great solution. But for people that are in the city, like let's say tomorrow they shut off our water here in Liberty Lake. My solution is, as Gerard said, we need water to live. I mean, there's a lake right down here. I could go get water there, boil it, make sure it's clean for myself, all that. But, you know, I've already paid for this system. If they shut off my water, I'm going down to their headquarters with a pitchfork and a torch and whatever, man. I'm letting them know, dude. I mean, pitchfork and a torch, I just say that like old school days. You know, we were talking, like, with the whole abortion thing and people that want to be able to have abortions going in front of Supreme Court justices' houses and all this. You know, I listen to the radio, I listen to conservative radio when I'm, you know, out and about, and they're all up in arms about, oh, you can't do that. You can't go in front of some tyrant's house that's trying to limit your ability to do things and tell them you don't like what you're doing. Now, I'm not saying about the abortion thing, I think it's a good thing, but I'm sorry, man, if they're trying to control your water, and they're doing things that are allowing me to not live because they're not allowing me to have water that I paid for, yeah, I'm going in front of their houses, and I'm probably not just going to take a pitchfork. Because at this point, it's now my life or theirs, right?
Yeah, the fact that we actually have to pay for water is kind of like astonishing to me. Like,
I would agree. That seems to me that should be one of the things that you really shouldn't have to pay for. I should be able to go get it for free wherever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
If our governments are really doing what they're saying they're doing and providing all these wonderful things for us. I mean, I know nothing's free, but like, it shouldn't cost us to have the most like important thing for life.
Totally. Yeah.
But just, I mean, it shouldn't. We're the only species on the planet that has to pay to live. So, I mean, I guess
Right.
that's a whole other episode.
Yeah, it is.
Well, we've been domesticated, living in cities, even suburbs, whatever. You know, we've allowed governments to control the essence of life. So, if they were to pull that away, if they were to restrict it in such a way that you can't survive, well, you're going to have a hard time surviving because you have been dependent on that system for your whole life.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem with everything that's going on and has been going on, right? It's dependency. Like we really haven't really fully grown up yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And all the information that's been suppressed, it's not really. I mean, a lot of it is like as a collective our fault, but like a lot of stuff. I mean, it was set up for us to fail. I mean, basically. And the fact that people actually think another man or woman has the right or authority to tell you what to do, it boggles my mind. Like I really can't comprehend it.
But I think the only solution really is to get back to nature and be dependent on yourself.
Yeah.
To provide what you need, because if you can do that, then there isn't a whole lot that can be done to take it away, aside from a invasion or something.
Right. You know, that's what I've been kind of talking to some of these people, and now that I'm back on Facebook, I've kind of been involved in some of these groups. One of them is the Spokane Schools group Simon and I talked about last week. But then there's like a Spokane against fluoride in our water group. And I would say that is the biggest problem with people and why we're not free, is no one wants to do anything for themselves.
No.
Everyone, well, I want to be able to have water without fluoride in it, but I want someone else to go get the water and bring it to my house, and I want to be able to control every aspect of it. And I mean,
right.
I don't want fluoride in my water either. I don't want them to poison me. But at the same time, if these people are going to, I mean, they've shown us over and over and over again that we can't trust them. And why are we going to, like you said, why are we going to give them any authority over our lives? And why am I going to trust them to bring clean water to my house?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go get my own water so that I know it's clean. It doesn't have fluoride in it. I mean, I've started doing that. I don't drink tap water anymore. They don't put it here in Liberty Lake, but I don't know. I'm not at the source where they're pulling it out with the pumps and putting it into the pipes to bring it to my house. So I don't know if they're putting fluoride in there or what they're putting in there.
Yeah.
So the only way is to provide it for myself. And for me to sit here and, oh, no, you guys have to do it this way because it's what I want. No, if you want something, go get it done.
Yeah, well, look at the prime example of what happened in Flint, Michigan. That's still going on.
Right?
I mean, people permanently damaged from lead poisoning from lead pipes. That's still there.
Right.
So I mean, that's what it's going to take for people to wake up and grow up. Is they're going to have to watch their children or property get damaged.
No, I think you're really right there. It is really going to come down to that for people to wake up.
Yeah.
Well, and look at the last 20, 30 years of what do most people drink? I don't know about most people, but a lot of people drink bottled water. They go to the store and they buy it.
Yeah.
In a plastic bottle, in multiple plastic bottles. And
Yeah, and you know where most of that comes from? It's
probably
Nestle,
tap.
which takes it out of Lake Michigan, I heard. So Nestle
it's-
owns like 90% of the water companies that just take it straight out of Lake Michigan. Here's your natural spring water out of Lake Michigan. So they're getting it free. They're have some resource, some pump that they're pumping out of Lake Michigan. That's why we're there in the drought, everybody. We bottled water. I did it. I found out.
They're stealing it from the lake and putting it in bottles.
Yeah.
And they have it stored in warehouses.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Oh, let's see. We've been going about an hour now. Do we have anything else to contribute to the water issue?
Nope,
No.
Simon just solved it.
All right,
Yeah, I solved the mystery.
Move to Lake Michigan. Oh, that's funny. All
Yeah.
right.
No, just look into primary water and collect rainwater. I mean, do something. I mean, get rid of your lawn, grow a garden, make the water useful.
Right. Yeah, as
So.
far as collecting water, I'll add that. Our friends Angelina and Jeffrey over in Spirit Lake. I know I'm going to say 1,000 gallons because that seems like a lot, but I'm even wanting to venture that she told me this last year they collected over 10,000 gallons of water off their roof.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah. I just did it in May and June. So
How much did you collect?
10,000 gallons. Like I said, I just did it in a month and a couple weeks.
Right.
I'm storing it in the ground nearby.
Oh, man. So, yeah, moral of the story is stop relying on government to provide things you need and do it yourself, and create a community that will help you do it if you can't do it yourself. A community that will help you do it without trying to control it.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Do you guys have anything else to contribute?
No.
Nope.
Good stuff. Thanks for joining us again this evening for episode 6, y'all. And until next time, remember to self-govern, right?
That's right.